Cell phones, cell phones. Everyone has a cell phone now. Believe it or not, especially if you were born after 2K, cell phones weren't really as common. Like where I'm from, I think we started getting cell phones in the early 2000s, so 2001, 2002, and back then landlines were the main thing, and we used to have like this thick phone books with yellow pages that we used to prank call people and swat spiders. Okay, I'm kidding about the spiders. No actual spiders were harmed in the retelling of this story, but I digress. My first cell phone was a Siemens A55. It was small and oval shaped, and it was orange, like bright orange in color, and had this silver keypad and a black screen. Guys, that phone, that was kind of awesome though, because it was tiny, like a Pokemon ball. That's even too big, because it could fit in the palm of my hand like an egg, right? And every time I used to go to school with that phone, I would get into so much trouble because we weren't allowed them. Is that proper English? Oh, yeah, because we weren't allowed them. And what they would have us do, like every time you'd come back for the new term, you'd hand in your phone to the doormaster and they would only give it back to you, but only for emergencies, which is kind of strange when I think about it now. Because imagine you're just minding your own business day by the dorms. Then out of nowhere, a freaking grizzly bear comes charging at you, or Dracarys from Game of Thrones, which is entirely plausible for this scenario because I learned in a school that was up in the mountains, so basically like Hogwarts minus the flying broomsticks. So anyways, as I was saying, an army of rebelling robots has been awakened by AI and it's attacking those schools. So now you're thinking, hey, where's my phone? I need to call my friends for backup, but you can't because your phone happens to be with the doormaster who conveniently is having an affair with the lunch lady and they're locked somewhere in a broom closet. But now you're stuck because you don't have your phone to call since you had to hand it in at the beginning of the term. So that was like one of those things whereby I always used to question, why are we handing in these phones every single time? What if something happens and I need it like now? But I guess they had to because, you know, school rules and society, laws, discipline and whatnot. But anyways, the whole thing kind of made me wonder, what exactly are the origins of the cell phone? And apparently to answer that question, we have to moonwalk all the way back to 1876 to none other than Alexander Bell, the dude who invented the first telephone. And fast forward a few years later, in 1900, an inventor named Reginald Fessenden. And by the way, Reginald is such an epic name. It's got that same vibe to it, like Bartholomew, Nathaniel, Benedict, Pennywise. Oh yeah, it is kind of epic. If he wasn't like a mad, possessed killer clown, Pennywise would have been an awesome name too. So Reginald made the first wireless telephone call by using radio waves to transmit the human voice. But this actually paved the way for the radio and cellular networks of today. If we think about it, if it wasn't for an inventor, no doubt tinkering away in his basement for hours, you know, like inventors do, would we even have podcasts? Would Joe Rogan exist? So that's why you really cannot give up on whatever you're working on, because in society, everything that we use, everything that we see, that we appreciate, and some things that we take for granted, but they're still awesome nonetheless. They were built by people who stood on the shoulders of giants, people who built and refined upon work done by others who came generations, sometimes before them. So really, you never know who your work is going to influence in the future. That's why you should never quit, guys. Never quit until you see your dreams come to fruition, because something awesome might happen or be created in the year 2040 because you never gave up, and that's some real talk. But back to the cell phone. In 1947, an engineer named William Ray Young proposed that radio towers arranged in a hexagonal pattern could support a telephone network, but though the theory was solid, the tech wasn't quite there yet. However, companies like AT&T offered radio telephones, even though they were still quite limited both in number and in range. It was so bad that the systems could only support a few calls at a time, and callers would have to wait for a conversation to end before completing a call. And you know what this reminds me of? I'm Zimbabwean, and back in 2006, 2007, we used to have crazy network problems. Like the network would be so congested, you could send someone a text message on a Monday and they would only see it on a Thursday. I kid you not, this used to happen. And I remember this one time I had traveled to the capital and I had to meet up with my cousin. Dude sent me a text, but I never even saw it. I only got to see the message 10 days later when I got back to my hometown. Like, what the heck? What if it was an emergency or something? Well, hostage situation. You never know what's going down. Now, this texts aren't delivering. Guys, the network back then was crazy bad. It was so crazy. In Zim, we used to have a running joke that if you want to wish someone Merry Christmas, you better send that message in October. That's how crazy it was. Yeah, and to make it worse, when you think about the prices we used to pay for SIM cards back then, because I got mine for 120 US dollars. Yeah, let me just let that sink in for a bit. 120 US dollars, guys. Imagine for a SIM card. That was insane because now they're selling for like $1. But then, because I think there was so much demand and people were still getting cell phones, so the hype was still like heightened. Everyone was rushing to get SIM cards. And unfortunately, we only had like, I think 2 or 3 service providers in the country. And mostly they weren't really pumping out new cards at a rate that could match the new demand. So as happens in markets, the black market found an arbitrage opportunity. They would buy those SIM cards in bulk, right? And then resell on the black market. You just walk up to someone in the street. They used to have like these designated sections. You'd know if I go downtown and you'd see people just standing on the corner acting shady. You'd pay them the money, then they'd hand you like a crisp envelope. They'd hand you this envelope with your SIM card. So yeah, that was crazy back then when you consider how much we used to buy. It was kind of like sneaker culture in the US. You know how people buy those sneakers for cheap when they're released online? Just wait, timing for the moment, start hitting click, click, click. Some people even program bots to order like hundreds of pairs of sneakers for them, then they resell. That was basically InSIM, but for SIM cards. But back to the tracks of this train barreling down to 1973 when the first cell phone was demonstrated by John F. Mitchell and Martin Cooper of Motorola. It weighed 1.1 kgs and was 9 inches long, nearly the size of a footlong sandwich with shredded chicken smothered in mayo, a bit of pickles sprinkled on the end, some tomato, maybe some lemon zest for that subtle tinge. Throw in some black pepper and a sprinkle of hazelnuts, some coriander, salamander, how I met your mother. This recipe is getting out of hand, isn't it? Let's just say that the phone was huge, and compared to today's phones, it's pretty much the King Kong of mobile phones. And I wouldn't mind having just one though, just one copy, one of it, just to put in a frame somewhere as a memory of where humanity came from. I'll put it next to my Siemens A55 for memory's sake.